Hello. There's quite a bit to talk about today going on in Ukraine. I'd like to start with the Odessa explosion. So, overnight in Ukraine, air raid sirens were reported in 12 regions during the night, and a number of areas reported having quite large explosions. The Kharkov region reported at least 3, and up to 5 large explosions have been reported in the Odessa region. On social media at the moment, this just a couple of hours ago, there's reports of a very large explosion, perhaps in Odessa, with seismic sites in Germany and other areas picking it up. It sounds like it's been quite a large explosion, and people are speculating that perhaps it's been an ammunition dump that has been targeted again. At this stage, there don't seem to be any images or video of it appearing yet, so it may be confirmed on social media over the course of the next day, I guess. This isn't the only explosion that's happened in Odessa of late. On the 10th of June, a few days ago, there was also reports of quite large explosions reported then. So it seems that the Russians may be taking an interest in Odessa and trying to perhaps thwart any planned advances or troop or munition buildups that may be being stored safely out of range, or at least thought to be safely out of range of the front line for a period of time. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see just if what comes out about that explosion, and particularly the big ones reported in Odessa. The Nova Kakhovka Estuary in the dam. Now, there are multiple reports coming out that yes, the dam was intentionally destroyed. There were a couple of theories floating around as to why that may have happened and who may have done that. What is now looking like perhaps being the case, given the current state of the estuary upstream from the dam wall, is that it may well have been the plan of the Ukrainians. The reason being is that the estuary is now draining, and so the Zapharoshia nuclear power plant, which was previously separated by about 5 kilometres of water in the estuary. Some pictures that I've seen today indicate that almost all of that water is drained away, and there are just now mud flats from what was the shoreline across to the nuclear power plant. So while this immediately would not enable an easy crossing for Ukrainians if they were to attempt to take the Zapharoshia power plant, given perhaps a week or two, if there's good weather, if there's no rain in the area, if any water that remains there continues to drain out, then they may reach the point where a land crossing is possible. Some of the photos I've seen of the estuary bed after being dried out seem to show some areas of quite extensive areas, or what may be sort of bedrock to some extent, or at least a different type of clay or base, which seems more durable than some of the mudflat areas around. So I'd be interested to see some good satellite photos of that, just to get a handle on how likely it might be that someone could make a crossing through there. This does lead me to think of what may happen in the future here, given that one dam has been destroyed, and it appears as though it may have been the Ukrainians, and this may be why. There are other dams further upstream from the Kakhovka one, and it raises the possibility that there may perhaps be Russian attacks on those dams if they feel that Ukraine is likely to mount an attack, maybe now a land-based attack at the Zapharoshia nuclear power plant. Remember that the Russians control the plant at the moment. And that perhaps the Russians may look to blow dams higher up to allow that water to flow down to refill the reservoir, or at least, if not refill it, at least to put some sort of a sizable water flow through there again for a period of time to delay any plans for a land-based attack. So Yes, interesting to see what will happen. There is apparently quite a bit of rain going on in that region, or just to the east of that region at the moment, towards Donetsk, to the east of Zapharoshia. That rain has actually been considered as to being a factor in why some of the reported fighting may have slowed in some areas. It seems in the last day or so there haven't been a great deal of large offensive maneuvers initiated by the Ukrainians. There does seem to have been around the Artyomsk area over the last 3 days, the 13th, 14th and 15th of June. There have been offensive raids. The Russian Defense Ministry is indicating that they have had offensives, but that their Russian defenders have been able to repel all of them in the Artyomsk, or what was Bakhmut region. There also seems to have been around the area of Kharkov, what's been referred to as Bradley Park, where those minefields saw the demise of a number of Leopards and Bradleys in the early days of the offensive, that there have been some more probing, smaller commando groups tactically probing around the flanks and the edges. Again, there are some reports, the Russians, that they have detected some of those. There's some footage I saw today of allegedly a Ukrainian commando taken prisoner and being taken back to what I imagine would be some sort of prisoner camp somewhere. So, the rain, if there is heavy rain there, it does seem to have an impact upon the use of things like drones and even helicopters. If the wind and rain is up to a certain extent, it makes it less easy to use them in their operational capacity. So some other news going on, some interesting things. So Biden, in the last 48 hours, has approved an aid package for $315 million. It's going to provide a small number of Bradleys, I think it's 10, and some Strykers. However, at the same time, the German Defense Minister Pistorius is announcing that there's up to 100 German Leopard 1s that are being prepared to being sent to Germany. So if we're thinking about what's happening with the offensive, it seems that at this stage there have been what's been happening from the Ukrainians have been more exploratory advances. There hasn't been a big advance yet, based upon the numbers of troops suspected to be in Ukraine and the number of tanks that have been supplied, and what's believed to be there already. There is the likelihood that there may be a large push, and this large push may involve hundreds of tanks, with somewhere between 400 and 600 being estimated as being available to the Ukrainians. So we obviously haven't seen that yet. There's talk that there may be delays and that this may happen slightly later, after they've had an opportunity to probe Russian defences and try and find a more suitable point where they think they might be more successful, and that by delaying a little bit, it may allow them to regain or get some of the additional equipment sent to them they may have lost in the initial advances, and also then just position their timing such that if they do make a large advance with a large spearhead of tanks, that it would be something that might occur closer to the July NATO conference in Vilnius, so that they have a lot of PR and media attention on them being successful, which Zelensky could then carry into the meetings with NATO to request and to try to garner more support and request further munitions and support. Who knows? This is some of the analysis that's coming out about what might be happening here and why we haven't seen the big offensive just yet. So we'll just wait and see on that one. Also, the recent sabotage of the Togliatti Odessa Ammonia Pipeline. This is a pipeline that runs from actually the north of Russia, quite far over the border into Russia, down into the Kharkov region, and then into Odessa. This ammonia is part of the agreed products being shipped out of Odessa as part of the Black Sea trade agreement, which is the agreement which is seeing the Russian blockade of the Black Sea be lifted on 3 ports in Odessa, which allows the Ukrainians to export grain from Odessa. The Russians have not been overly happy with the way that this grain deal has progressed over the last few months. There was a plan to extend the agreement for 6 months. It's been reduced down to 2 months just recently, and today there's talk that Russia may not go forward with that and may continue not to. Now, the Russians have been indicating that they've been having problems with insurance, restrictions on payments and logistics from the West. So while the Ukrainians were able to ship grain and products out, the Russians who are trying to ship it out through this area, it's then being restricted by the West. The US are denying that these are issues for the Russians and are claiming that the Russians are shipping more than they've ever shipped before. Who knows? But certainly something there is bothering the Russians, and they're talking about not continuing with the deal. This sabotage of their ammonia pipeline is likely to just add weight to that. Also, the people who are going to be impacted by this isn't directly going to be the Russians. Yes, they'll suffer financially, but this ammonia is used as fertilizer in the production of fertilizer. So what we're seeing is a large ammonia and effectively fertilizer source has been disrupted. Now, that's not good for global food security, particularly with Ukrainian grain supplies being reduced and Ukraine and Russia being large providers of grain and wheat. Also, with there being, going back a month or so, a large amount of Ukrainian grain that was rejected due to contaminants in the grain. So anything that's going to be slowing the production of fertilizer and the delivery of grain is going to have an impact upon not only developing nations who receive nearly 60% of what's coming out of I think it's 30 million tons have been shipped so far under this agreement since mid-2022 out of Odessa. Not only those developing nations, but also developed nations who acquire the other 40% of that grain are going to see a rise in prices, and that will continue into the future if the ammonia and fertilizer is unable to be produced. Okay, moving on from the Odessa ports and pipelines. Wagner Group. So early this week, I saw an announcement from Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is the leader or the titular head of the Wagner PMC, a private military company, who certainly rose to international fame with their efforts in the area of Artyomovsk, or what the Ukrainians are called Bakhmut, in that grinding battle through Bakhmut. Prigozhin certainly seems to like the limelight. When the Wagner Group are engaged in battle somewhere, it's generally the place where we receive the most news of what's happening from the battle lines. Prigozhin seemingly allowing his troops to send information out. Yes, an announcement came out that after the Bakhmut, the Wagner forces have been put on R&R for a period of time, and that they will be back on the 6th of August. However, just early today, I've seen that there is now another conflict between Prigozhin and the Russian defense minister, Sergei Shoigu. So Sergei Shoigu has made an announcement that all volunteer detachments need to sign contracts with the Russian military. So this seems to be an attempt to bring all of the PMCs and volunteer groups under the control of the Russian military, which from a command perspective makes perfect sense. If you've got volunteer groups who are private military companies operating and you wish to have tighter control of them, then yes, having them sign contracts. For them, the benefits are apparently better pay, better insurance, and payment and support of families if the soldiers are killed. However, there has been a long-running disagreement between Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of Wagner PMC, and Sergei Shoigu and Gerasimov and other senior military leaders in the Russian military, where Prigozhin has made a number of claims against them, that they're treasonous, that they're inept, and that they shouldn't be leading military operations. A lot of this has seemed to stem from issues around the battle in Bakhmut, where Prigozhin was claiming that they were being starved of shells and unable to operate at the level they wanted to, and this was leading to deaths of his fighters. Some of you may remember the very powerful, extreme video that Prigozhin released a few weeks ago, where he was furious and was directing his fury towards the military leadership in Russia, and the backdrop behind him was the bodies of 70 or 80 of his soldiers who had been killed in the last day of fighting, and he was blaming that upon being starved of shells. So while that's been going on for some time, interestingly, Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, it's reportedly controls Storm Z, which is another PMC. So there may also be some rivalry between Prigozhin and Shoigu about these private military companies. You can imagine this. Leading a private military company, wanting to get contracts, get into different areas. There would clearly be a lot of rivalry between these forces, so that may play into that. Even an example of that is the claims and counterclaims between some of the Russian military who was on the flanks of the Bakhmut or Artyomovsk area and the Wagner fighters of Russian military taking pot shots at the Wagner fighters as they were leaving the area, of Wagner fighters kidnapping Russian fighters, holding them ransom, doing all these sorts of things. Who knows the exact details of what's going on there, but in the middle of a war zone, you can imagine, incidents of friendly fire, whether intended or not, would certainly flare tensions, miscommunication in the fog of war, and just rivalry between groups could certainly lead to these sort of events happening. And Prigozhin seems to be someone who will definitely play on that and use that to his advantage, or to the advantage of his private military company. And it must be said that from all reports, his soldiers are very loyal to him, and they seem to recognise his standing up for them. But who knows what will happen now? It will be interesting to see if Wagner are back on the front line from the 6th of August as planned, or if Prigozhin's refusal to sign these contracts, effectively putting firmer control of Wagner underneath Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, if that will have some impact upon them getting work. Articles coming out today are indicating that the Chechen volunteer force may have in fact signed a contract and may perhaps be receiving some work that could have gone to the Wagner group. Although, given the size of the front line here, I would imagine that there are multiple locations, and that if Wagner are wanted, they will be deployed somewhere. So moving away a little, I guess, from Ukraine specifically at the moment, but talking more widely around how this might impact the Ukraine war. So yesterday, Donald Trump was arrested. So he was arraigned, taken into a courtroom, fingerprinted, and all of this. This is based upon a claim of mishandling of sensitive documents, and 37 felony counts have been raised against him in this indictment, which he's been arrested for. Now, I've seen Andrew Mercouris of the Duran do a very good analysis of this. Alexandr Mercouris of the Duran do a very good analysis of this, and one of the things he highlighted was that the large number of counts is often an indication of a weak case. given that if you have a very strong case, you only need to have 1 or 2 charges in there and you're confident of those. If that's not the case and you think it's a weak case that you're trying to prosecute, then what you do is you just throw everything at it and you hope that something might stick. So whether you love Trump or hate Trump, it's up to you to decide. But it is interesting, and it is interesting that Trump has been singled out and arrested for this. Now, Tucker Carlson on Twitter, who's just recently been axed from Fox and is now getting more views than he was before, doing his video addresses on Twitter, he has today spoken about this topic, and he talks about America's principles being at stake. And some of the examples that he brings up and some others have brought up is that while Joe Biden, it's well known that Joe Biden has had classified documents at his home, apparently in his garage, which was not a secure location. Both Bill and Hillary Clinton have had issues where they've had secure documents, Hillary's emails, taken off secure premises, and they had not been declassified. And even people like Dick Cheney, who would, in the time that he was involved in the Iraq War, will no doubt have taken home classified documents, and yet none of these people will be prosecuted for that. This does seem to be a case of Trump being the outsider, not being part of the established elite in Washington, them coming after him, and Biden's administration really acting in some respects like a banana republic in looking to imprison his major political challenger. So Trump's rating really well. He's getting over 60% approval rating with the Republican base. There are a lot of people who would like to see him president again. Biden's approval ratings are low, so it's real. I guess it's really a case of dirty politics. What's going on in the US at the moment with that? I think last couple of things to talk about tonight. BRICS. So the Organization of Nations, Economic Organization of Nations, Russia, India, Brazil, China, and South Africa. The Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov is indicating that the numbers of countries that are requesting to join BRICS is growing. It's over 20 nations now that are trying to get into BRICS. Now, this is something that would have been unheard of just a few years ago, or even a year ago. But it seems as though the West's actions in Ukraine, Biden's policies in general, are turning nations against them. This is happening in the Middle East with the Saudis all around the world. One very interesting point to note is that French media is reporting that Emmanuel Macron had spoken to South African President Cyril Ramaphosa this week and was requesting a seat at the upcoming BRICS summit. Now, what's Macron playing at? Is he purely looking to get in front of the BRICS people and then, as a Trojan horse, request that they stop and desist what they're doing and that they really should just listen to the West? Or is Macron perhaps starting a split and, betting both ways, and maybe suggesting that if things don't go well for the West and if Russia is to win in Ukraine, that if France aligns themselves with the BRICS and becomes friendly with the BRICS nations, they would have an opportunity to then go and trade there, perhaps rather than being tied to trading with the West. Who knows? At this stage, questions are being asked about this, these media reports from Paris. Moscow apparently is asking Paris what's going on. There's been no formal announcement yet from Paris about this, exactly what has happened, or it confirming that the request was made. But if it is, then it's a very, very interesting topic and one to watch. So the other thing is that Putin and Xi have been communicating again, and this is just, again, demonstrating how, if it was the US's desire to create division between Russia and China, that it seems to have failed dismally. Just read a little bit here from some reporting from TASS today that Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday lauded Chinese leader Xi Jinping's efforts towards strengthening the comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation between Moscow and Beijing. Putin said, "It's difficult to overestimate the efforts you have been making for years to foster the comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation between our countries." Your visit to Russia in March gave a powerful impetus to the mutually beneficial cooperation in key areas, Putin added. Russian President emphasized that he expected the constructive dialogue between the two countries and their close cooperation on pressing issues facing the bilateral, regional and international agenda. So their close cooperation on the pressing issues of the international agenda to continue for the sake of the Russian and Chinese people. Xi reportedly has called Putin his closest and trustworthy friend among his foreign counterparts and has underlined that he cherishes these friendly ties. So this is a bromance between Putin and Xi, which is just demonstrating how closely aligned they are becoming economically, politically, in terms of the security of the geosecurity of that area. There certainly isn't a case where it appears that China and Russia are forming barriers with one another. They seem to be becoming very, very close trading and military supportive partners. This, when you can contrast this to what's happened with the Biden administration, is so very different. Again, the Blinken is now trying to, this weekend, get to China. This was a meeting that he's been requesting for a while and has been denied by the Chinese. A State Department spokesman has said that Blinken will meet with senior Chinese officials, but won't mention who, and haven't mentioned if he'll meet with Xi. And I doubt that he will meet with Xi. I don't think that President Xi Jinping will meet with Tony Blinken. Usually he will meet with people of his level. So if Biden was traveling, he may meet with Biden. But I think that that Blinken will be sorely disappointed if he thinks he's going to get a meeting with him. Look, that's a kind of a summary for today. I'll be back soon with some updates and try and find out more about Odessa. Look, if you've liked this, please subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. I have another channel, The Third Party Show, which is a different format. If you're interested in that, have a look on YouTube or Rumble or Spotify for The Third Party Show or the 3PS. Thank you.